shopping mall or Gap store. I am talking, in fact, of a different kind of revolution in the suburbs. That's right, the Richard Yates novel, Revolutionary Road, which is now a film, of course. And that is how we were able to have a very cool Q&A today with screenwriter Justin Haythe. Of course, if you're out and about in the suburbs and you're by a newsstand, check out the latest edition of Creative Screenwriting Magazine sold at your local Barnes & Noble and Borders bookshops in the United States, Canada, the UK, and Western Europe. You could always look at our website, www.creativescreenwriting.com, to find out more information about what's in our latest issue. You could also use discount coupon code CSPodcast there. That will save you a good few bucks on a subscription to the magazine and actually any other product in our online store. So check it out. But now, without further ado, let's jump right onto the stage of our sold-out screening of Revolutionary Road right after I introduced screenwriter Justin Haythe.
Thanks for coming down. So, you wouldn't have seen it yet, and I actually can't give it to you, but Revolutionary Road is the cover of our January-February 2009 issue. So, you'll get one in the mail, my friend. Are you on? Is your mic on?
I think I'm. Yes, I'm on.
Good. So we're gonna start moderated, then open it up to the crowd. So have your questions ready. Breaking in stories is where we always like to start. We had you in our screening series and in our magazine for your first film, The Clearing. Talk about that film, because like this, it was another film that people would consider kind of independent in sensibility and caliber, but with an amazing cast and really well played. Talk about how it came together.
God, it's nice to talk about The Clearing. I've been talking a lot about Revolutionary Road. The Clearing. The Clearing came together. It was. I've been fortunate enough to have very good collaborative relationships with both the directors. I was on set for both movies, and The Clearing came together. First-time director Peter Jan Brugge approached me about adapting a very different kind of adaptation. Actually, it's an original idea, but it was. I guess the word is inspired by a real event. And really all we had was that sentence about this kidnapping gone wrong, where an ordinary man had become obsessed with a wealthy man's success and decided to take it for himself, as it were.
You were a first-time writer technically before that, correct? So
yes.
How did it kind of go through the channels and get into the hands of Redford and Willem Dafoe?
Well, Peter Jan Brugge, the director, is a very established producer. Had been Michael Mann's producer. Warren Beatty's had worked with Warren Beatty. A series, Alan Pakula, a series of great directors. And so while as a director he was very much independent, and the first time as a producer he knew how this thing worked. And I was a first-time screenwriter, and therefore exceedingly cheap and affordable. So we worked together, developed a script. I was writing it, and then on the basis of a draft, CAA took me on, and Redford is of course a CAA client, but also Redford and Alan Pakula of course have a great history together. So through both of those channels, I suppose.
Like tonight's film, it also kind of has a concept of a marriage being tested. Which I found is kind of interesting that this would be your next project. You know, this is obviously the Richard Yates novel from 1961 of Revolutionary Road is extremely famous. It's been batting around for years, and it's kind of gone back and forth on, is it filmable? Would people show up to see it? What would it look like? Talk about how you became involved with this project. To my knowledge, it was through the BBC.
That's right. The book is beloved, and as Richard Ford called it, a literary secret handshake amongst the people who loved it, and they press it on anyone who will take it. And for very good reason. It is an American masterpiece that has not had its due, and hopefully a byproduct of this film is that it will. And he's a brilliant writer and has written a handful of books that I think will last the test of time. I had read it before with a kind of novelist's hat on and admired it as a novelist, and then the BBC approached me to adapt it, and I had a quick criteria of things I wanted to hear. Were they committed to the period? Were they committed to the ending the abortion? And were they going to drink and smoke as much as they do? Because I don't think it's a frivolous detail. And knowing, and Marion Rosenberg had been attached to it, and she was a great custodian of it for years, and only released it to the BBC when she also felt they were going to do it right. So that's how it came to my life. And when I got those answers to the questions, I was thrilled at the opportunity. I mean,
What year was that?
that was 2004. So I was a little more naive than I am now, and even then I knew of the likelihood and eagerness of the studio system to make a movie that ends with a botched abortion.
I mean, to me, it says Christmas Day release.
Absolutely. Actually, it's the day after Christmas, so you open your presents and then go find out what your life is really all about, you know. Now I know slightly more about the business, having been working in it for some time, and it turns out the business model for a film like this is to get Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, and Sam Mendes. It's an extremely unlikely. The way I think it is a very uncompromising film, and I think it was the umbrella Sam held over it, and the commitment of Kate and Leo to really to try to do this book justice and to not compromise it. I think that's how it happened.
I do really respect that vision, but honestly, just for a second, how did the day after Christmas release come about? Because I mean, I was almost surprised that that's what they chose, because I could have easily seen it hitting like in October, but in the holiday season, it's like, if you weren't already depressed about the holidays. and I say that respectfully, I like your film. Was there ever another release date, or did they just say, because of the star power, we are holiday release?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
But there's a science to this stuff, or theoretically a science to this stuff. But I think I love the way it's being marketed, because I think it's being marketed honestly. I think it's a great trailer. I think it tells you what it's about. I think the poster doesn't lie either, and I think that Paramount are doing a great job with it. And I also, Scott Rudin is producing it, and he's a master at this stuff.
He is.
He knows what he's doing.
No Country for Old Men last year. I mean, the kid's doing just fine.
So so I don't question his decision.
I wouldn't either. Talk about your process. I mean, you're a novelist yourself. How do you break down a novel and figure out the filmic parts of it?
Well, it depends on the novel. I think there's different kinds of adaptations. One is you read it and it's a germ of an idea and it goes in the drawer, and the other is a book that sits on your desk, and this book is definitely the latter. Yates was a master novelist and also, I think, a brilliant dramatist. He wrote a celebrated screenplay of Lie Down in Darkness that hasn't been shot. And he's
actually, I was going to ask, what is the status of that?
Oh, somebody has it. I don't know.
You don't know who? Okay.
No, but God helps whoever's going to rewrite him. You know. But in this book, there are elements of it that are very cinematic. The scene is set, lit, and I mean, with incredible grace. And you follow his example. You abandon it at your peril. And I think he's a great dialogue writer. Having said that, it's also, I think, a story largely about what people don't say to each other, which has to be translated, and that's the issue. So for me, what it is I think that the short story form is probably closest in scope to what a movie is. So it's really about trying to take the breadth of this novel and put it into a central shape, a central motion that matches that. And once you decide on that, for me, it was. First of all, it really was: are these people going to escape? That's the plot of the movie, and I like the way that it's shot with a plot, because there isn't actually that much that happens. Once you make that decision, that central spine, then it's a gut decision. Which scenes are necessary for that, and what needs to be invented, and what needs to be conflated, and then there's also the craft issue of just really. I mean, my copies of Revolutionary Road are, taped together and pulled apart many times.
Did you kind of break it into an outline on a piece of paper showing, like, Act 1, they get the idea to, they're unhappy. Act 2, they get the idea to hit Paris. Act 3, they don't, if that was the ordering of it?
No, not necessarily the ordering of it. I mean, yes, if you're going to talk in the act structure, I mean, the beginning, middle, and the end. It's a strange shape for a tragedy, because they start... screaming at each other at the side of the road. And to me, again, the reason I thought it was drama was I thought the question of the movie was going to be, who are these two people screaming at each other at the side of the road, and which one of them is trapped? Because they actually say it in that opening fight. So they start low, they go high, and then they fall lower. So that kind of triangular shape is I suppose a version of a 3-act. But
so did you map that out on paper before you started writing, or did you just kind of know that inherently and just go for it?
Well, it was interesting when Sam first became interested in becoming attached to it. I remember having a conversation with him, and he said to me, and I think it's very much a theater director's note. It's a great one. He wanted to know what the shape of it was. I mean, as an object, what does it look like? And so I think it was instinctually the way the script had been conceived. But having him hold me to account on that was definitely enormously helpful in drafts forward. So, and I did think about that. My vision of it was a gun going off in the air, and it seems like it's going to go up forever. And then when it comes back to Earth, it's with even greater violence.
How long did it take you to write your first draft?
I don't know.
No, really? Okay, I like it. How was it? A really long first draft?
No.
No?
I tend to write drafts pretty quickly, and also the whole idea of what's the first draft and what's not. I mean, there's my first draft, and then there's the first draft. I know that the Guild would not approve of this, but then there's the draft that I will show to the producers or the collaborators.
You talked a moment ago about the beginning. I mean, it is very interesting because, you know, we see them kind of meet at a party, and he does a pickup line that's okay. They seem like they're mildly attracted, but, you know, it's not a big moment, I think, on purpose. And then it does jump in time to being married, miserable, with kids in the suburbs. That's the structure. And I think I have not read the book, but from my friends that have, they said that the book starts off with a time jump that's like that as well, correct?
The book starts with the dress rehearsal for the play.
For the play, okay. So it just throws you right into the present tense.
And there's a lot of moving back and forth in the first portion of the book, to their first meeting, to their childhoods. And the film did not always open with that scene, but it was always incredibly brief, and as you suggested it, that I think there's a lot of wattage on the scene when those two are together dancing.
Definitely.
And I think their falling for each other is genuine, but I also think, like a lot of falling for each other, it's revealed as a little bit random, and suddenly now it's how are we going to lead the rest of our lives once you've had that initial connection. I mean, it's interesting to me about questions of compatibility. I feel like there are two issues or two moments. One is when you first meet and there's compatibility of, are we hot for each other? And then there's the other one of, do we live the same way?
There's a danger in a structure like that, and I'm just curious what your thoughts were on it, because as we meet them without really seeing them falling in love, because most of these type of stories, they fall in love and then they fall out of it. That's the melodrama version, and I really like the fact that you didn't go for that. But the danger inherently is that by not showing them fall in love or there being a sympathetic side to either of them, you could accidentally wind up hating both of them as you listen to their arguments against each other for the entire movie. Mm-hmm. So was there ever any more that you played with on the page to get you to go one way or the other, or just to find both of them as a love that was true, that we do see having fallen apart?
No, I mean the vision was always. Look, it is hugely challenging to start with that fight, but it's something that I was committed to, and I know something that Sam was committed to, partly because of its how startling it is, and I think that the performances are good enough, and I also think that Yates is a good enough observer of human beings that there's this kind of shudder of recognition that I think both actors have given largely vanity-less performances, and that makes me like them, even though they do deeply unpleasant things to themselves and each other.
I liked it. It was irreverent. Character goals, people talk about a lot. Frank kind of wants to lead this good life his father never had, which is a path he's unsure of because of his father's failures, it would seem. And so it goes from Paris, he goes from Paris, obviously, back to the concept of the strong job his father never had, which theoretically in early computing would lead to success. April, she's a bit harder to pin down exactly what her goal is. It seems like she wants a good life for her family. It seems like she wants Frank to have the chance he's never had. Talk about kind of doing that, because as Amy Dawes, our editor who wrote the article, pointed out, you took it out of the point of view of just Frank from the novel and kind of equaled it for both Frank and April for your adaptation, which I think was a really smart choice.
That was one of the major departures from the book. The other was that I don't think Yates really allows us to believe in Paris as a possibility. I think that for the drama of it to work, we really needed to believe in the possibility of their escape. And for me, there was always a question of what was Paris going to be. Was it going to feel mythic, like a metaphor? Or, I mean, for that generation, it was something different. A lot of them had actually been there in the war. And there was I think Hemingway said, all good Americans go to Paris when they die. You know, it was that artistic place to go. But, I mean, for me, what she wants, if that's in a way what you're asking, is I think she wants to be free, and I think she also wants to. I think them deciding to go to Paris in the middle of the movie is them falling back in love, and that is also one of the things that really appealed to me, was that it's a very different kind of love story. I think of it as a tragic love story, because they're falling in love again, and it's in a way they're falling in love with their youthful selves. I also think it's a relationship that is about reflections. It's about wanting to see the image reflected in the person you're with, wanting that the image reflected back at you is something you want to see, and I think that part of what they're fighting about is demanding that of each other.
I have some friends that are pretty miserable that live in Paris. It seems like this could be a grass is greener kind of complex as well. So just if I heard you right, you're saying that you wanted to make it a real concept of something that was doable, at least from April's point of view. But Frank's point of view, you left kind of the way that Yates kind of set it down, which was that it was a concept more than it was a realism. I mean, I think that Frank genuinely loves the idea of it at the beginning, but he loves more how close it brings to April. I don't think the movie suggests that there aren't miserable people in Paris. I mean, Frank says as much. I don't think that it is. I mean, I think it is a book and a film about a period and about suburbia in a highly conformist time that is in some ways like ours, in some ways not. But I also think that it's really about reaching an age. As a friend of mine put it to me, it's either the age of disappointment or the age of experience, where you have grown up, and this is the person you're married to, this is what you do with your life, and how are you going to deal with that? Are you going to reach for something more, or is this a story about a man growing up or a man betraying his better self? And I think that the answer to that is up to the viewer. I also think the reaction to the movie, in a way, there are going to be people who are going to say that she's got a good-looking husband, nice house, money, 2 kids. What's her problem? They all have their health. Yeah, and I mean, seriously, the real misery isn't like suburbia. It's go to a cancer ward if you want to see some misery in the world, Yeah, and especially in the 50s. And again, it's not saying that this isn't, I don't think, explicitly a thing about suburbia. It's about, as I said, for those people who feel that way, this isn't going to be the movie for them. But I think it is about. It's an existential want. It's something more, and I think it's about being perhaps married to the wrong person, and I think it's about dealing with the limitations of life. And I think it's an unanswered question whether or not you lie down and take it, or you and is that a safe cop-out, or is there something more you can have? Be it, I mean, I think that by the end of the movie, I don't think she believes in Paris anymore, but in a much more honest way, she believes there's another life for me. And I think for me, that's why she emerges as the slightly more heroic character. And I'm not sure whether or not Yates would agree with that, but I think that final scene they have together is a very honest scene when she tells him to value himself, and that she doesn't hate him, and that she's not going to let him make her have a baby and hate him for it. One of the things you just talked about was they're realizing their limitations. It seems like one of the other tragedies of the film is, although they're talking about both being so, quote, special in the beginning and being kind of above everyone else around them, truth is, from the information on the screen, she really isn't a great actress. And although he's a guy that has a lot of ideas and dreams, he has no focus to them. So would you say that one of the other parts of the tragedy is that they really are coming to terms with the fact that they're not special and they're almost like their neighbors? They're not like their neighbors in the sense that I think that at the beginning they're both genuinely unhappy. And I think this is a reason the book is certainly resonant to what's happening now, is that I think people are feeling the goalposts have been moved for them slightly. I mean, they have everything. They have that, incredibly high standard of living that was in the 50s. And I don't think it's about that she's not a good actress. I think that, as I said, I think that their frustrations are real at the beginning of this film. I love the character of Jack Givings.
John.
Did I say Jack? Yeah, sorry, John. It's his mental illness is it's an old concept that there's the wise fool who could see it all and tell it all like it is. Talk about that character, because every time he was on screen, he was a show stealer. Everything was pitch perfect, and I thought you did a great job with it.
Thank you, and a lot of that is Richard Yates's vision. I mean, yes, I think it's the one part of the book that could feel creaky, the wise fool, and I think that it doesn't has a lot to do with how well observed he is a character, and also Michael Shannon's performance, which I think is absolutely show-stopping. I mean, 1 degree to the right or to the left, it wouldn't work. But he functions in 2 ways. I mean, he functions in saying the truth, as it were, but he also functions as a reflection of Frank, in the sense that Frank handles him beautifully the first time he's there. He handles him the way we would all want to handle somebody like him. And at the end, of course, he handles him very differently. And as his mother says, he is unwell. So he's not just a mouthpiece for a subtext. I think it's also he's a real human being, and I think that the story reminds us of that at a moment.
The dialogue was great, and it was almost like a kind of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf moment, where he finally traps them in the end, saying that he feels the sorriest for the unborn child. That was a great moment. It wasn't too much, it wasn't too little, it was just right on the dot. Talk about that moment. Was there ever more to it? Was there ever longer versions of the scene? Because I respected how compact you kept it.
No, and you know what I'm glad about? I'm not going to be that baby. That's a Richard Yates line, and I think it makes the rest of the movie possible. I mean, I think without that scene, without him saying that, I think it's very possible she would have had the baby and spent the rest of her life in her cups. You know how she could have been someone if she hadn't been made to have this child. I think he forces her into I think she's in the period of figuring out really how she feels and what she's going to do, and he forces her into the next part of the movie.
They have a lot of arguments in the film. There was always a great momentum to them, aside from the dialogue being crisp and well acted and well directed. Talk about keeping that momentum alive on the page for those arguments.
Well, it's a different generation in the sense that this was a generation who would get together and drink and talk for entertainment. I think, as I said, that I don't think the drinking was is a frivolous detail. I mean, this was in a way a kind of bipolar generation. They would alter their chemicals so dramatically at the end of the day, and then in the morning be so hungover that their chemicals were somewhere else. I mean, I think that the part of their eloquence is of that time, and I think it's also that part of the momentum, I think, is that they're chasing each other around. They're chasing the possibility of actually being honest and confronting each other, and I think most of the time missing. But I think their intention is true, and I think the fact that they never really resolve until the very end, I think, is what keeps the arguments flowing on the page.
You told Amy Dawes for the article that basically they're also the generation that came home from fighting World War II, and this readjustment to such a calm life in the suburbs was also something that was kind of adding conflict in a sense. So elaborate on that.
Well, I mean, it was also striking to me that the war features very little in the book, and the speech she gives about how he felt going up the line in the war. I mean, it's performative for her in a sense. I mean, I think it was interesting to me how little the book deals with the war. I think that to be involved in something like that in your early 20s and to return to the calm is something many of us don't know what that's like. But again, I think that that reaching that still water where your life wasn't what you thought it was going to be, even if you don't have the war to match it up against, I think that's what makes this book last.
One of the thematics of the film that's all throughout it is hard to miss is kind of reassessing your life, where you are and where you want to go. I absolutely loved the speech that he dictates about inventory control, knowing what you've got, knowing what you need, and knowing what you can do without. It also hits at just the right place. Talk about kind of factoring that in.
Well, I mean, the novel is brilliant on work. And it's a very hard thing to write, I think, and keep in any way interesting, because in most stories, work is kind of glossed over as this gray period. I loved it, and I love the set design in it. They really had that they constructed that whole room, and with the little lights that would go off on the desks. Work is it's interesting that there was a point very late in the script process, actually in pre-production, when we added some of the childhood flashbacks from the book, and they were shot, and I'm very happy they're not in the movie.
Which, could you elaborate? What were they?
Sure. I'm not. They were. I think that Frank's relationship with his father does function in the film as a piece of plot. In the book, April's relationship with her parents is that she was largely abandoned by them. The shred of it you get is when she says, I've never been anywhere. And she was raised by a series of aunts, and her parents are sort of these flappers. And I think because her childhood memories don't function in plot, it seemed to over-explain her and reduce her aspirations to be free to a kind of Freudian, she's that way because her parents fucked her up, which I don't think is what it's about. But work and the seduction that J.O. Sanders, I think, in a great performance, does to Frank is where the bullet starts to fall back to earth. You don't know it yet, but he's suddenly being offered the thing that I think in his gut he's terrified he won't find in Paris, which is being special.
Talk about your daily habit. When you sit down to write, how long do you write for?
Usually depends how much time I have. I have 2 small children.
Actually, throw that in. A lot of writers that we interview have families, and they say that they have to kind of write around the responsibilities. So how do you work that schedule?
Your day is a lot shorter. It used to be more open-ended, and now it ends at 6 o'clock. And I was talking about this with somebody recently about what the hell did we do before we had children? Because we get the same amount done and must have just spent a lot of time sitting around on our arse wasting time. And when you're on deadline, you get it done. If it's left up to me, if I'm writing a book if I'm writing a screenplay and I do a lot of outlining, the writing can happen very fast. But I can write probably 2 big blocks in the morning, probably 9 to lunch, and then in the afternoon probably 1 till 4:30.
Cool. If you get writer's block, how do you handle it?
When you're on deadline, you don't have the option. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you get it down on the page. And Yeats had a great line about pushing the pencil across the page. And it's always interesting to me is you can do a lot of outlining, but outlining can also become an obstacle to writing, because it never ceases to amaze me how much happens on the page that you don't plan for. So you just push that pencil across the page and be willing to throw it away.
What surprised you the most? What was something that you didn't plan for?
Well, it happens all the time. It happens in any kind of interaction.
Just curious if there was something amazing. I like the monologues in the film.
There's a lot that's amazing.
I like the monologues in the film. They were generally short. They weren't too expository. They really worked. Talk about writing monologues, because sometimes when people sit down to do something that's going to be over 3 sentences, you have that worry about it really being a showstopper, calling too much attention to itself. It had a natural flow here.
Well, it has to come out of character. I think if you're slapping a monologue on a character who's not a monologuist, it's not going to work. You're going to feel the writer and you're going to think about the writer. I think as a rule, don't do it unless you deserve it.
Talk about rewrites. What kind of notes did you get from Sam after he read your script?
I think writing is rewriting largely. Nabokov, to quote somebody, has a great line about how writing more with the eraser than the pencil end of his pencil. The best thing about screenwriting as opposed to writing a book is that it's alive the whole way through. It's alive from development, rehearsal, shooting, editing room, and it's also deeply collaborative. Any good script has a lot of different hands and ideas on it, and especially something that was done like this, collaboratively, and was shot largely in sequence, which is rare, and I think it's something the actors absolutely loved, because they learned about their characters as it went on. So the 2 big pieces that when Sam became involved was, one of which was this issue of shape, and the other which was pressing down on the tragic love story of it, that there was a possibility that these two people could have got away. And then in terms of, actual line by line, I mean, there were, your relationship with a great director is sometimes editorial, tells you where you're right and where you're wrong, where you're lost, where to keep going.
Is there any major scene you want to call out?
No, I mean, as I said, this is the whole thing is alive. I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of rewriting done on the set. I mean, that's actually not entirely true. I was there, and there was work to be done. The two scenes that really were worked over the most were Let's Go to Paris and Paris Was a Childish Idea. I mean, those were worked over again and again and again, and with pages and a pen on the set.
A lot of times with actors, there is a necessity to do actor-specific rewrites, part of the collaborative method. Was there anything specific that Leonardo DiCaprio or Kate Winslet kind of, through rehearsal or just through talking to you, kind of necessitated a rewrite?
No, I mean, this I think that their performances are without vanity. It's kind of incredible. I mean, they're movie stars. I mean, you rub, under the sheen there, I think they're consummate artists and actors, but they are movie stars, and they had no hesitation of going anywhere. And there was a real feel. I mean, it'll be hard to match this experience because we all loved this book, and we had something there to judge ourselves against, and we were all pulling in the same direction. There were no demands made or anything like that. The trouble with a book this good is that someone will come in occasionally and say, can I say this line, And you think, oh Christ, here comes the book again. But usually they were right, and usually it had to go in.
Were you worried about modern audiences kind of looking back at the 50s? Was there anything else you needed to do to kind of set the time without going too Stepford Wives on it? Because, a lot of modern audiences, as we live in a time with a 50% divorce rate, would just say, pack your bags, hightail it out of there. But obviously, for a lot of women at that time, that didn't seem like a clear option.
No, and I think for most married people, it feels like a very difficult option, even today. I don't think it's an easy thing to do. The 50s are such a mythic period, in terms of American movies. All you have to do is have a finned car and a couple of those details, and suddenly people bring a lot to it. And I like the way that the period doesn't seem to be fetishized in any way, and that by setting this dramatic. By setting by what is essentially domestic drama against that epic period, it kind of elevates it to a more mythic scale. But I know that Sam did not want to use American movies as a reference point for himself. I mean, he looked at photography, and Saul Leiter was a photographer who the book was around a lot for images and palette, and we watched documentaries and music, but it was not about watching movies that depicted or made in the 1950s or depicted in the 1950s.
Last tough question before we turn it over to the crowd. People have debated this ever since the book came out. The final scene, where she does the abortion. This is the second time I've seen the movie. I still kind of feel this way. It almost seems like she is cashing out, and it's a suicide of sorts because she knows that she's past the date. She's doing it alone. She has no help, and she's putting her life at risk. They have the big breakfast together that's almost ceremonial of sorts. She seems like on the phone she wants to say goodbye to her children, not just like, you'll come over later. But at the same time, I think in Amy's article, you mentioned that to you it doesn't read as a suicide. So elaborate on that.
I think if you're going to commit suicide, you put your head in the oven, for one thing. I think that she's alone because in the 1950s, there was no safe and legal abortion, so you had to be alone, especially if you were disobeying the wishes of your husband. I think that the breakfast scene feels ceremonial because it's a departure from the way they deal with each other. As I said, I think she's telling the truth in that scene, and she sees the truth clearly, which is they don't belong together anymore. I think that she's, for me, my interpretation is that she's willing to take the risk, but that it's not a suicide. And I think that she wants to speak to her children once more in case. In the book, she leaves a note, and it was shot, and I didn't want a note because I felt a note said suicide. And I think that when she walks off screen and says, "I need help," either if it's a suicide, she's had a change of heart, or she really wants the ambulance to get there to stop the bleeding.
Going back to what we were talking about a second ago with the divorce, if it wasn't a suicide and she wasn't planning to get divorced, what would an abortion have done for her?
I mean, I think that once she aborts the child, that she will leave him.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let's turn it over to the crowd, all the way over there on the aisle. He was curious about changing the point of view from the Wheelers to their friends, and talk about that.
Well, I mean, we do go into that point of view earlier in the film. We were alone with the Givings and we're alone with the Campbells at certain points in the movie. The book ends with that turning down of the hearing aid. What's different is that you don't... in the book, Frank gives his children away to an older brother. There's that. I think of those scenes as a triptych. Frank in the playground. The Campbells before that. I don't want to talk about the Wheelers anymore. Frank in the playground and that hearing aid. The struggle was to make sure that hearing aid scene didn't feel cynical. And I don't think it does because of Richard Easton's performance. I think he's an amazing actor. But I think
it was a great scene.
And I also think that it doesn't feel cynical. I think it's a sort of act of cohabitation, that he kind of looks at her with disappointment. Like, you're going to do that? Okay, I'm going to edit you for your own sake.
See, all married men should have hearing aids, and you could turn it down.
And it's a
good tactic.
It's a different. It's the kind of other road.
The concept of him giving the children away, as you just said, why was that? Why did you decide to leave that out? Because that's another interesting step.
Well, I think that in a way the film is slightly less bleak than the book. And for those of you who haven't read the book, believe it or not, right? And I think partly, I mean, it's interesting to me that first of all, there's no evidence in that scene that he hasn't given them away. He could be visiting, sure. Which he does, and I'm glad that people haven't taken that way, and it was a conscious decision to have the children largely out of focus and on the periphery of the scenes. I mean, the first time he really looks at his children is in that birthday scene, and to have him sitting staring at them, rather than I felt like he and April were always looking at each other as if they were looking in a mirror, and the children were sort of off here, and I felt that this was progress for Frank, that the children were going to be all right, that he had been sort of broken, but that he was still standing.
Another question. Okay, second row. Talk about creating dialogue and keeping it in the vein of Gates. What percentage would you say that you kind of created?
I couldn't put a percentage on it. As I said, anytime I could steal from Yates, I did, because he's so good. And it's a part of the task was to learn how to think and talk Yatesian. And it's funny. There's certain things that I forget, which is which. And anytime that anything I've written is mistaken for Yates, I consider it very high praise.
A few more questions. Question was in regards to the rights. How did it come about being acquired by the BBC before you came involved?
I'm a little shaky on this. There's a great biography by Blake Bailey called A Tragic Honesty. It's a really beautiful book, but it does chart the trials and tribulations. There were various different people involved, and I'm going to get it wrong who it was, and it came close to being produced a couple times. The rights ended up in the hands of Patrick O'Neill, who was an actor and had struggled with an adaptation of it. Yates tried to get the rights back during his lifetime, and Cynthia O'Neill, Cy O'Neill, was a lovely woman and was an actress in films like Carnal Knowledge, and she gave it to, asked Marion Rosenberg, who had been her husband Patrick's acting agent, to look after the material, and she didn't release it until the BBC came along. So that was the sort of 40-year gestation, and also, I mean, it was as I said, it's not an easy sell to people who have to put money into a project.
What was the budget and schedule?
God, I think it was around 30, and I'm not very good at the number of days. I think it was around 50, maybe.
I mean, it's a tough time for independent films. I'm really sorry to see that this is going to be, I think, one of the last films of Paramount Vantage. A lot of these great outlets to make thoughtful films are kind of disappearing lately. What are your thoughts on that? What did you kind of see working with them in these, I guess for this, their final film?
Well, I mean, it's not exactly independent. Paramount
At $30 million, it's not independent, but
it's
no one else is doing stuff that's
one of the good guys, right?
Yeah.
Yes. It's a bleak time. It really is. I mean, it's a tough time. But I think that, and I think there'll be less films made, which I don't think is entirely bad, because it does give films a chance to be seen. But I think that the pendulum will swing back. I think that there'll be a new way of getting these films seen and getting them made. I think that films like this need to be made for a price, and I think films like these happen because of the commitment of the actors, who have that. I mean, largely this would not happen without Titanic, but because the people involved are artists, I think that strangely the biggest, least independent movie ever, produces this.
A few more questions. Sorry, the question was in regards to the connection that helped make The Clearing happen.
I was living in New York, and I was in graduate school, and I had started writing a novel. And a friend of mine was in the business and had, at one point, suggested I try writing film, and so I took a hand at a script, which I hesitate to even call it a script, because I knew so little about what the hell I was doing. But there was some sequences in there and the writing in there that it happened across the desk of this producer who was looking to do this dirt cheap, and saw something in that writing. I mean, perhaps I'm being unfair. I learned the form and tried to teach myself by watching movies and writing out the script on them, which is a great writing exercise.
Give us an example. Like, what movie would you watch, and then you would map out the script, or you would actually write it?
Yeah, you watch a movie like Rosemary's Baby with the remote control, and you try to script it, and you read scripts, and you begin to realize. I mean, it almost like a riddle. You have to have two people in a room. You only get one object. You have to make something happen in the minimal amount of pages that changes it. Because compared to writing prose, you have less tools at your disposal, and I think it's a great writing exercise for anybody writing anything, because it really.
So you would do a full-length feature script of Rosemary's Baby, not an outline.
No, I mean, scribbled on a piece of paper. It wouldn't be polished. It would be, that's interesting. That's how long that scene is. I mean,
that's cool.
This was giving myself a film education, and so that process of writing that first script was that. The pages then crossed the desk of this producer who flew me out here, and we had a meeting and sat down, and he told me about this real incident that had happened in Holland. And I said, have you ever read The Zoo Story? Because it was a play I loved, and about two people, in essentially a domestic, or essentially a non-confrontational situation that ends in a spectacular act of violence. And so he said, okay, we're talking about the same thing here. And then off we went.
Another question, you sir in the front row. The question was, he had read that Mendes had cut about 20 minutes from the film, and he was curious about kind of what you learned by watching those edits and how that's possibly helped your writing.
Well, first of all, I think there's nothing that was cut that I would fight for. And Sam has said that they're great scenes. I mean, I've seen them all. They're cut, they're scored, they're timed, and in amongst themselves, they're great scenes, and it'll be a fun DVD for me to watch those scenes and like visiting my abandoned children, But what I learned in terms of what I learned is that every I mean, I don't think you can ever hope for only writing everything that you write getting shot and cut, because I think that you need. There's sort of three stages, I think. There's the writing process, there's the shooting process, and the editing process, and it needs space to grow in each one. And without that extra room in the editing process, that I think it's much more difficult to find the movie. But the lesson is that the movie is always looking for that one spine that takes you from the beginning to end. And as I said, I think movies are more like short stories than novels. They're one movement. And anything that holds that up is not going to be in the movie.
Are there any of those scenes you want to talk about? Tell us what was cut.
Let me think. As I said, there's a couple of childhood flashbacks that I'm pleased didn't end up in the movie because they, as I said, they felt reductive and explanatory. There was a scene between Shep and April when she has decided to go to Paris, and you realize in that scene how in love with her he is, and it's a scene I like very much, but it never had a place in the movie from the first cut. It was about these two people, and it was about them getting lost. I think that portion of the movie is them falling back in love, and that was extraneous. There's more of the play. As I said, there was a big different opening. You saw.
Was there a thematic tie-in about what the play was about compared to what they're going through?
The play is The Petrified Forest, and it's pretty appalling actually. But there's a fun movie with Humphrey Bogart is in it, and I can't remember the name of the British actor. It'll come to me.
Leslie Howard.
Leslie Howard, yes. You're right. And he kind of shows up in tweed in the middle of the Arizona desert.
Dashing, though.
Yeah, and she wants to go, and they want to go to Paris in the play.
Sounds like a good cut. Might be a little on the nose there.
Well, no, there wasn't. I'm sorry, I misspoke. There wasn't more of the actual them performing. There was them approaching the stage, getting ready for that moment of anticipation. Because the book starts with a rehearsal where she's actually very good, and then it goes horribly, horribly wrong, and that the moment of possibility was replaced by moving that flashback.
Other questions from the crowd? Over there, against the wall. Could you talk about the comedic tone and kind of managing that tone into what people expect of the 1950s being stereotypical in the middle of this intense drama?
The book is very funny, and it's wickedly funny. And what people find funny in the movie is often telling about the people watching it. I think that, again, I mean, it's all about character. I don't think you try to bring. You don't think we need a funny moment here. You think a character finds a moment that may be amusing, or I think the funny moments. I mean, how lost Maureen is in that seduction scene can be funny. I think that John Givens can be funny, but why is he funny? Is he uncomfortably funny? I'm not sure. But again, I mean, I think that in terms of tone, it's a more manageable task, I think, to think about consistency of character, because populating your movie, they will dictate the tone.
To my knowledge, this book was on Time Magazine's top 100 novels of the 20th century, but Yeats died at the age of 66, penniless. Talk about what you kind of learned about Yeats throughout your research that you also tried to bring to the characters in the film, or just more into the story itself.
Not much, because, I mean, I'd done a lot of research about Yeats because I admire him. There was one line that was in the movie that Yeats had told a joke that I had read in the biography about taking off a woman's corset and her bottom exploded like an inflatable raft. Which I thought was a great line, but it wasn't room for it in the movie. But other than that, I mean, I think that Yeats is in this book. I think I don't think you need to know anything about the man to try to bring this book to light. It is, in some ways, an autobiographical book. But in a way, I think Yeats's worldview, knowing too much about it, would obscure the adaptation process.
What's next? What are you working on next? What are some of the other projects you've got going?
I got a handful of different things. I've been doing some TV, thinking about doing some television stuff. I like the sort of prolonged narrative of that, and I'm just finishing up a contemporary version of Jekyll and Hyde for Universal.
Really? That'll be great. You've been very generous with your time. Thanks again for coming down and chatting about your film. Give it up again for Justin Haythe. And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to screenwriter Justin Haythe for showing up to talk about his latest film, Revolutionary Road. And, two other comments I would make is that I think I was wrong actually saying that Revolutionary Road was
the last film of Paramount Vantage. I think actually that was me getting my facts jostled in my crazy brain. Basically, I think Paramount Vantage, that was the last film of them kind of independently producing films. I think if I got this right, they're being folded into Paramount proper. They will still exist. They will do more acquisitions rather than outright funding of films. But allegedly, they might even still fund a film or two. So, sorry about that question. I think I got that wrong. And also, you heard Justin and I talk about his other film, The Clearing. We did have it in the screening series in the days before I was podcasting. So, I think there is an audio recording that I made for archival purposes. I will see if I could find it, maybe one day get it up. So, keep an eye out for that. And of course, it's always great to have someone come through the screening series not once, but twice. So, thanks again to Justin for coming down and spending time with us. If you dug this episode of the podcast in general, consider tossing a virtual tip into our PayPal virtual tip jar by visiting www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com and look for the PayPal icon. Your tips are appreciated and definitely help out with equipment, hard drives, and all the other stuff we need to keep this podcast running. Of course, feel free to check out my blog, which I even managed to update on the rare occasion that I have time to do so by visiting www.jeffgoldsmith.blogspot.com. You can also always feel free to drop me a line by emailing me at yo.goldsmith@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button in iTunes or your podcatching software, because that's how episodes are downloaded automatically every time you click refresh. And if you have a minute, feel free to leave us positive feedback in the iTunes Music Store or at podcastalley.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, thanking you again for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.